All right. When everybody gets in here, because we're having potluck today, so it's going to be a little bit late for people to get in. You can't hear me? Now? Okay. All right, let's get started. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Okay. Maybe we'll have a few stragglers here in a minute. All right, let's go ahead and pass things out and get started. Thank you, Doug. Seems kind of dark in here today. I guess all the lights are on. That helped. Oh, yeah. I can see my page. Okay, last week I was confused. I was supposed to hand this out later in the class, and I forgot. I was thinking you had the copy. So anyway, here's a listing of the crosses that have been used all throughout church history. Remember, we're studying right now the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church meaning universal, and it's going to become the Roman Catholic Church, because in 313, Constantine basically quit persecuting or seeing that persecution happen, and then actually in 380, I think it was, or 383, the church becomes part of the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is the one that is controlling a big part of the world, known world at that time. And as we discussed, there's things that the church is going to do to try to set itself apart. And one of those things is going to be the ability that it has to be on pretty well equal footing with the king and the empire by being nationalized and Romanized. One of the problems, though, is that through time, some of the paperwork I'm going to hand out, through time, that's going to actually, because of all the infiltration and politics and power and authority, it's going to start corrupting the church. And you can see why it happened and understand why it happened, but that still was not the purity that God was looking for. All right, have y'all looked over the crosses? Yeah? Okay. Anything stand out to you about the different crosses? If you looked at the number 5, would you know that's a cross? No, it doesn't look like it. But who is it being named after? A saint. And so we have crosses for saints or martyrs, and then we have crosses for different other things. Like if you look at number 9, the Cardinals have their own cross, and it's a double cross. And instead of being a regular cross, they're putting basically symbols on it to make theirs stand out. And then the papal cross, the Pope, number 10. If you look at number 12, the five-fold cross, looking at that, is it distinguishable and hard to understand it's a cross? Makes it a little difficult, doesn't it? Now, why would they do that? It's more confusing to me than just a regular cross. All right. And number 13, let's see, that was a Maltese cross, and 14 is the Celtics. Anyone ever listen to the Celtic women that have their choir? Not a choir, but the group of women that sing. And there's some men that do it too. The Celtics. Beautiful, beautiful songs. And so when the Celtics are brought into Christianity, they get their own cross. All righty. Number 15 is a symbol of death. And of course, number 18 is cross of the Christ the King. So anything to point out there? Nope. All righty, go to the next page, please. And you got 2 pages of popes. And I want y'all to look through them kind of closely. And as you look through them, I want you to think about what you see from the beginning to the end, and is there anything that stands out with the names and dates? Just spend some time looking. Okay. 9 years. The third pope. Okay. All right. And they're using a C for about the time of. I think that's what that means. Anything else? Okay. Do you know what can you tell us what an anti-pope is? Anybody? An anti-pope. Does that mean he's against the Catholic Church? It is a anti-pope is somebody that puts himself in a position to say, I'm a pope, but he's not authorized by who? Who's not authorizing him? The official church. So he's an anti-pope. So the anti-popes are going to be quite a few of them. From what I read, I mean, you'll see some on here, but there was a total of between 30 and 40 anti-popes that come along through history and actually try to take power, just like before the Christ. And around the time of the Christ, there's going to be a lot of Jesuses that are going to claim to be saviors, or they're going to claim that they are the one, but they weren't. And so humans a lot of times try to interject themselves. And so you watch in the world, you will see dictators or those in power sometimes lose their power. They really didn't lose it, but guess what? Somebody takes it away from them. And so a lot of this fight's going to be in the church as far as power. Anything else stand out to you? All right, for a long time, very short tenures. If you look down at on the very first column there, and I'm looking about a third of the way down, 253 to 254, 254 to 257, 257 to 258. And so what could this, there could be different meanings for this, but what could be one of them?
Maybe they were really old when they started and they died quickly. That would be the more
Kind of like an elder,
yeah.
being more mature, older. And we're going to see that several, through time, if we get to talk about it, several are going to be pretty old when they get it, and they're frail, and there's going to be jockeying for power. And what I said last week, if kind of recount, the Pope gets to decide how the next Pope, now this is over time, the next Pope is going to actually be put into power and how it's done. So there's not a structure according to Scripture. There's going to be a scripture. There's going to be a time and place and a way according to the Pope. So that's another change from biblical. And I was talking to my brother the other day, and his wife was Baptist, and he married her, and he started with a Baptist, trying to raise a family. And one of the things we discussed about elders and deacons in the church. And as far as I know, most Baptist churches only have deacons. You know why that is? Well, what did we have in about 1918 or so? World War I. What did we have in the 1940s? World War II. And then in the 60s, we had another big war, Vietnam. And so not only were a lot of people killed, maimed, and disabled, but the Baptist church had so many people that went off to war that they didn't have people to put in as elders. And so they started going with deacons. That's what his preacher told him and his background. And so he and I talked about elders and what it takes to be in that position and the husband of one wife. And he said that is because that church with the preachers he's talked to believe a lot like we do. Now, that's not all Baptists, I can promise you. But he said the eldership bothers him, and why we haven't gone back, because the wars have been over a long time, and gone back to elders. But the difference is, and I've got modern to back then, is instead of having elders and deacons that make decisions and work together, they have what in their church? Okay, let me back up here. Rob and Gary are still deacons in the church. For what reason? Do you remember what was said? Because we're under the state. And you have to have somebody that's in charge that if to fill out all the paperwork and sign it. Well, the Baptists have trustees. And every 1 to 2 years it changes over with trustees, and you have men and women in that are considered trustees. Now, if we didn't have Rob and Gary being deacons right now, you got to find some men that's going to take authority. And if you go out and borrow money, you got to have somebody that's going to stand there and sign it and say, the church is responsible, or we are responsible. Well, you wouldn't get any trustees if they had to be responsible just by themselves. So they make it, like he said, most of the trustees make it where the church is responsible if, like, you do a big growth project and you build on. All right, so time period. If you look at the second page and start down, of course, the bottom, like 1700, Clement, 1700, 1724, 1823 to 1829. And then if you get over to 1963 to 1978. So they're starting to not only extend their time, but what happened back 2,000 years ago? Did the people live to be what we are today? No, and especially in a lot of the foreign countries where they didn't have good sanitation, they didn't have food, they didn't have all these things. So the people just didn't live long. All right. Yes. Yes. Less than 200 years ago, and basically if you had a major illness, one of the kings, Henry VIII, had, if I remember correctly watching the movie, you know, they have the horses and the guy has the long spears and they run at each other and hit each other. I think he got nicked on the leg and he had gangrene and things built up for a long time. And one of the things that one of his wives told him that he stunk. You stink, man. You're just nasty. But he never could get it to heal. And of course he had gotten fat and was not taking care of himself. Anything else stands out?
Especially when you see like Pius, I think 1870 something, he was the longest serving pope behind what tradition says was Peter.
Mm-hmm.
He served like 32 years.
Okay.
A lot of that, I think, has to do with the church. The Catholic Church began to move at a more glacial pace because of the expansion into a global church versus a regional church. And yes, a big region, Greater Europe, but the church's expansion into the global scene, I think, kind of made things move a little slower too. So
Yes. They were overwhelmed with all the conflict because in the 600s you had Muhammad, around 5 something, and then you had the Muslims taking over a big chunk. I've heard different things, but big chunk of the Roman Empire and conquesting, and then you have the Crusades where it's going to have a lot of people killed as the Muslims come through, that's going to disrupt the church because they're taking territory, lots of territory, and killing everybody. And then you're going to have the Crusades, and they're going to come back, and they're going to start trying to take the land back, and that's going to cause a lot of conflict. And through time, what else is going to happen in the church?
Plagues. You have the Black Plague and stuff like that affected that through those times, affected the population.
You had the Black Plague. I've kind of lost my train of thought here, but no, that's right. You're right. So what are some other things that could happen?
Well, I think the nature of political strife that we see in, say, the 600s, the 700s, is very different from the nature of the political strife that we start seeing in the 19th century, 20th century. Things on a global scale have changed dramatically, not only are people living longer, you're seeing changes like he was saying in hygiene.
Yes.
For instance, you see the advent of the aqueduct, at least on a large scale, in the Roman Empire. Sure,
Yeah.
other countries have done something similar, but the Romans like it. And then you see that being a direct contributor to consolidation of urban situation to the point where it was a very different world. And you have popes being appointed at about the same age as they've always been living, but now they're living 30 years longer versus 5 years longer, 10 years longer.
Yes.
So it's a multifaceted change for sure.
Yes. Okay. And then something's going to happen that's going to create a lot of problems in Europe. Anybody know what that is? Where they take people and torture them, tie them up.
Think of the Inquisition.
Oh yeah, the Inquisition. The government is going to start taking over and doing for the church the Inquisition. And who are they? Well, it could be a political foe, but who else is it? Somebody that is going against the church and having problems with the church, or just a problem, is called a what? That we want to excommunicate in the Catholic terms.
They're looking for Protestants, the Reformers.
Well, they could be, or they could be looking for heretics. Yes, the heretical people that are causing problems are just not going along. The Inquisition, especially in Spain, and that Spanish Inquisition is going to find the heretics, and it's going to torture, behead, kill, and it is a gross time.
There's a striking parallel to the Salem witch trials, where you have heretic being kind of a nice little catch-all word that was applied to people that maybe weren't, just like in the Salem witch trials. Sure, some of those women were definitely what people thought they were, but some were just not liked by the society, and as a result were murdered for it.
Yes.
So you see that in the Inquisition. It was sure there were some that, I don't want to say anybody deserves murder, but there were some that probably fell within the definition of a true heretic, and then there were some that were just seen as political adversaries.
Okay. I have a book here, and I've read from it before, A Dark History of the Popes, Vice, Murder, and Corruption in the Vatican, and talking about witches. Witches were said to destroy crops, remove milk from the cows, and kill and eat children at the Sabbath feast. Let's see if I can find another thing here. And there's all kinds of pictures in here of people searching for witches. And I just got this book last night and looking at it. And then here's another one, The Horrors of Torture. in the atmosphere of terror and suffering, amid the screams of agony and assailed by the stench of fire and roasted flesh at the burning grounds, the urge to confess, if only the torture would stop, made proving innocence well nigh impossible. Many victims appeared to go mad under the instruments of torture, which included some of the most excruciating ever devised, such as head and limb crushers, slow stranglers, or cat's paws, which shredded flesh, all caused unimaginable pain. And they're showing here some of the torture things that they did. I'm going to read some more of this a little bit later, but during what time period are we, after we got the apostolic age and the first time, then we go into what's called the medieval time. And the medieval time is the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages means the Roman Empire has fallen, the world is in chaos, sickness, disease, no water, everything's in chaos. And so at times the Pope tries to take and control some of this, but a lot of this is out of their control. And that's another thing, is there's people always looking for power.
It's interesting too, during the Dark Ages, the medieval period, you had a juxtaposition of the church's involvement in civilization. You have what you're talking about, this heinous, terrible, violent period of fear and terror. And then you have the infrastructure of the church being directly responsible for mankind's clawing their way out of the Dark Ages. There's another book called How the Irish Saved Civilization, and it directly tells the story of the Irish monks who were, at that time, Ireland was a distant land. Ireland was on the fringes of society. And these abbots in these small monasteries that were up in the hills in Ireland, they are directly responsible for saving, preventing the brain drain of mankind during the Dark Ages. They preserved so much of man's written knowledge through typical monk activity of, we're copying this. Why are we copying this? It's just because it's just what we do.
Yes.
And they went out and actually sought anything that was written down, not just Christian texts. They saw everything, scientific texts,
Yeah.
astronomy, and so on and so forth, and they copied it and they preserved it, where in the rest of the known world, that stuff was being actively sought out and destroyed by the church. And so as a result, these Irish monks were doing the opposite of what the rest of the church was doing in that time, in that they were not destroying man, they were not destroying civilization, they were actively preserving it.
Okay.
Maybe not intentionally, but as a result, we came out of
Well, since they were monks, and they were living basically celibate a lot of times and just isolated, they didn't have a lot to do. And they were wanting to do something constructive. And later I'll give you types and names of the religious orders, the monks, the knights. So that'll be coming later. And to give you illustrations of some of the things that went on. Other night, when I taught history, I showed a lot of the Nazis' concentration camps and showed the actual videos and the raw footage of what went on. Well, I got into Prime the other night, was watching Prime, like HBO, and I went over to the concentration camps and just give you an illustration here today of the last century versus what went on. And they went through some of the unpopular camps, and even though I've seen a lot of it, I was in tears because some of the torture things that they did and how they would stretch them and just devastating. and the lack of food, which happens when you're at war. Food is scarce. But things happen, but they were just mean. I mean, absolutely, they had authority and power over them. And the torture tactics and the things they did was gruesome. And I showed those videos, some of those pictures and stuff to my kids because I wanted them to see what seeing somebody else's inferior could do. And so if you want to kind of see what we're talking about, look at some of the concentration camp video, the original, where they made the actual Germans go out and dig up the bodies and take notes of it and actually deal with all of this, and so that they couldn't say it didn't happen, because I know I've heard of people that said this never happened. Well, they just don't want to believe. But anyway, anything else you see about the popes?
You mentioned, or it was touched on a little bit, at least, the action power, the active power, the action power sometimes is in the Pope, and sometimes it's elsewhere. Sometimes it was an external political, a secular force that installed the popes, and sometimes it was the Pope controlling politics
Yes.
outside the church. And so you actually have kind of this almost cycle going back and forth, and that would affect the lengths of the office, stuff like that. The Pope started thinking maybe he's too, if he was installed and he starts thinking he's got some more power and influence, he can get whacked down, and they put in somebody else in his place because they want to keep the Pope under their thumb, or vice versa.
Yes, because I will read a little bit later. I wasn't really prepared to talk a lot about the popes, but I'll read a lot later about a lot of the things that went on with the popes, and there was a lot of good ones, but there was a lot of them that, I mean, sexual orgies and things like that. It happened. Okay, there's one other thing I was looking at and that nobody's talking about. Let's get over on the right-hand side of the last page and kind of look up from the bottom about a third of the way. Clement, 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 innocent, innocent, Clement, 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 Pius, 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 Pius. Anybody notice something going on here? Why would they use a different name and basically go under a different name?
I think to some extent it's some sort of assuming power of that name.
The name,
These are folks that are known throughout that church for being powerful, for being good, for being, so they take that name as sort of an assumption of some of that power.
okay. I had one I was going to talk about, but I may not be able to find it. All right, I'll have to look that up and get a copy of it. So, a lot of the same names. All right, if you'll look at the next page, I think I gave you 4 pages. Yes, I gave you 4 pages. The medieval church. And when you was talking about the Irish being an outskirts, thank God the Renaissance came along and there was an enlightenment, there was art, there was things that brings it out of the dark ages. And so when you have art, enlightenment, rational thinking, what can that lead to though?
Independent thought structure away from the church.
Independent thought structure, and usually when you have the enlightenment, you become more materialistic, right?
Actually, not just away from the
because anything goes.
You see that claim in Bolshevik Russia after the murder of the Tsar and his family, who were devout.
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Devout, the Tsar and his family in Russia were devout Christian, and they were murdered by the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks were staunchly atheist.
Okay.
And there was, prior to that, the stirrings, this morass of degeneracy that had started in that, because of some tolerance, I would say, by the Tsar and that power structure. But then, after that happened, well, what happened then? We have 60 million Christians systematically exterminated in Russia by the Bolsheviks.
Yes.
Immediately leading up to the Second World War. And that's a direct result of some of that humanism into
The humanism and getting away from God and getting, I have the power, I have the authority, I am.
And so you see that in those leaders of the Bolshevik Revolution, there's a consolidation of power, which you see that every time in communism.
Yes. Yes.
Consolidation.
And the other thing talking about that is in Russia, just talking about history. In Russia, one of the things that they would do is, and you saw this in different parts of the world in different historical settings, is Russia, one czar would have open up society, want them to be educated, want them to really be enlightened, and then the next czar that would come along would shut it down and says, I can't have rule and authority if I have all these people that basically want to challenge me. And so you cut the education out, you cut the enlightenment out, and you cut their ways of having an ability to grow and challenge. You eliminate it. When I was reading in back doing a term paper, I did it on Russian education, and the percentage back in the 70s or so, I think it was, of educated Russians was not very high. All righty, the medieval church, social disintegration and religious renewal. I call the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic, starting in 380 when it basically became the state religion. But in 600, we'll see on here the collapse of the Roman Empire. And let's read the bottom, the very bottom down where it's in dark. The Catholic Church began to change with the more significant alterations coming in the context of the church's recovery from the decline of the Carolingian Empire and the unsettling effect of the Vikings, which were the barbarians, intrusions. Political chaos was accompanied by religious decadence. So political chaos was accompanied by religious decadence. So we have the popes and all their people wearing all these fancy, elaborate clothing. And we have the churches going from just this, something basic, to elaborate. And so the church goes through periods of shrinkage and growth. Money, no money. And if I remember correctly, Italy at one time was divided into 4 kingdoms. 4 kingdoms. And so you have the Pope sitting there going, just trying to keep things going and not have the northern kingdom fighting the southern kingdom or vice versa. And so you have all this going on. All right, the 11th century Cluny reform movement brought the return of the church's fortunes in a positive sense. But it was also a time that witnessed a decline of the notions of divine grace and human ability. What's wrong with getting rid of divine grace? How are we saved? By grace. So if you get rid of divine grace, what do you coming. Do what?
I said not saved.
Not saved, but you're losing a higher power, which means who has the ruling authority? Man, the king, the pope.
Instead of going to God for salvation,
You go to the church because the Roman Catholic Church sees itself as the mother hen, and all these heretical churches, she still thinks she's the one, and I'm not saying right or wrong, but she basically, even though they're having trouble like a mother hen has trouble with one of her chicks, she puts them under her wing and basically is calling them back, and they're saying no. And so you have all this going on. While the Roman Catholic Church did not begin at that time, the seeds of the movement were being planted. And over on the right, you see the emerging Roman Catholic Church, and so they have a different view of it, but this is the Cluny Renewal, the College of Cardinals, Celibacy of Priests, the Fourth Lateran Council, the Auricular Confessions, Rosary, and I don't know what a missal is. Do you, babe? Okay. All right, that's all I have for this week. I won't be here next week. I don't know who Rob will have teach, but we'll finish up probably most of the Catholic teachings or whatever next week, the next week, or maybe 2 weeks. And then we'll get on dealing with the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit, and the Trinity. And we'll deal with the misconceptions and the misthoughts about that. That will be a very interesting study because that's going to be like Jesus and all the people that argue was he divine, was he human, was he both, did he have two natures, did he have one nature, did one overwhelm the other? Well, the Trinity is going to get like that with a lot of people because do the Muslims believe in the Trinity? They believe in the one God. And if you trace their history, they have a different genealogy, totally different. And so some are going to say that there's scriptures to say and kind of lead to two different religions as being false. And I don't know how I'll get into that if I will, but if an angel of light appears, and we might talk about how Muhammad found his way just a little bit. All right, I'm through unless there's something else somebody wants to say. Thank you for all the comments. That helped a whole lot. Finally found something somebody would talk about.